So what we'll speak about is Angular 7 framework. That's the latest framework in the market. So coming to my certification background, these are the certifications which I've done: 70532, 33, and 34. Developing and implementing and architecting Microsoft solutions. That makes me Azure Solution Architect. And I'm also MCTS, which is Microsoft Certified Technology Specialist, which is another two certifications, C Sharp and .NET. So essentially, five certifications gives me these two titles. So that would be very much handy for us when we learn any of the technologies, because certifications give you more insight into technology. So this would be something which we will leverage as and when we learn Angular. Coming to why Angular and why we need to get into something which is related to JavaScript. So if you're a programmer with previous programming background, you could have definitely landed onto Stack Overflow. So the number of topics which are discussed on JavaScript as of 2016, this is the highest number of discussions happening. One programming language is leading all the way. That is JavaScript. This is 2016. We are in 2019. So it has the graph would have been is much bigger now. So more and more discussions on JavaScript. There is more knowledge available outside, and there is more need for JavaScript professionals. When we speak about Angular, we are speaking about JavaScript. It is an enhanced way of developing an application using JavaScript, but we'll not use JavaScript in our Angular world. We'll use something called as a TypeScript, which is a superset of JavaScript. Why TypeScript? Why should I use TypeScript? What are the advantages of using TypeScript? All of that we'll speak about once we start digging deeper into Angular. But just understand, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, and you're still in the JavaScript world. So being a JavaScript professional is pretty important today in the modern day applications. Everything is JavaScript driven. If you have learned or heard about mean stack, MEAN, MongoDB, Express, AngularJS, and your Node.js. So all of these are technologies which can be used to build end-to-end enterprise application by just using JavaScript. We'll speak about it, but just understand that JavaScript is one of the leading technologies to build enterprise level applications. And you should have heard about full stack developers. There is a more and more need of full stack developers in the market. So what is a full stack developer? A guy who can work on all the layers of your application. So getting your hands on onto technologies like JavaScript will enable you to be full stack developer. You would be not restrained to just one technology. So essentially, what we have is in a real-time application, you will be having something like this. So you'll be having a client, and you'll be having a server, a client interacting with the server, and then you'll be having something like a services layer. Why a services layer? We'll speak about it. For now, just understand that this will modularize your application. And then we have something like a DB layer. Your typical 20,000 feet view of any project would look like this. There will be a client, a server, and a services layer, and a DB layer. When we speak about client, so if at all I am speaking about just JavaScript, can I use JavaScript to build end-to-end application? Yeah, in today's world, it's possible. On the client end, I would use something like Angular 7. That's what I'll use at the client front. On the server, I would use Node.js. On the services, I'll use Express.js. Node.js again uses JavaScript. Angular anyway uses JavaScript but uses TypeScript as a superset. Express.js, as the name says, it again uses JavaScript. In the DB, you have MongoDB. It again uses JavaScript to interact and to get the things done. You have JavaScript which spans across layers now. So you can build an enterprise level application, and this is what is mean stack. Getting a hands-on with JavaScript you can go ahead and build an enterprise level application, and you will be hearing a lot about Node.js in today's modern requirements for employers are looking for people who are smart in Node.js and Express.js. Why? Because it's more faster, it has its own advantages, but just understand that JavaScript is the way to go. And once you are good in JavaScript, it is very easier for you to be a full stack developer, because you can be expert in all the different layers, and you're full stack capable when you're working with a JavaScript kind of an application. So how did JavaScript evolve over days? Initially, 10 years before this date, JavaScript was only used for validation. That is, I have a form like this. I have a username, a password button, and a submit button. So I would just use JavaScript to validate whether the username is a valid email. Password has all the special character, capital letter mixture and stuff before it is actually submitted to the backend. So this is what JavaScript was used for when we were speaking about it 10 years from now, past in the past. Then JavaScript evolved into something called as dynamic HTML. It started manipulating the HTML. That is how it evolved to the next stage. Then came your XHR, your XML HTTP requests. All of your calls to the backend are HTML XHR requests. We will see about how everything is XHR when we speak about Angular and when we run the Angular application and work on it. But just understand it's a very famous paradigm, and it is very actively used across the browsers. All the browsers backend calls are XHR calls, and you can have a look at it by just going to your network tab, say F12, and just go to the network tab. Just so if you just do look at this, all of your calls, what are happening in the backend, all of this is what is happening in, and in the network calls, you have, again, I am speaking about GoToMeeting, you can see require.js being used. So again, all of these are XHR requests, which are happening in the backend. So we'll see a lot about what XHR is. So if I just say XHR, filter by XHR. So what are the XHR calls within your application? All of that would be listed. So we will see what XHR is and what are the different ways in which we can use XHR in our application. But that's what evolved in once JavaScript was enhanced. There were XHR calls which were being done in the backend, and it is quite famous even today. Then came your frameworks like jQuery, which is still famous, Prototype, YUI, different frameworks which will help you work with JSON. Yeah, so we have jQuery. That's our next framework. So in the jQuery, what did they do? They had an entire superset of JavaScript, and you can work with JavaScript in a much flexible way. So jQuery is famous even today. There are multiple applications out there which use jQuery extensively in their applications. That's how it evolved into a framework kind of language. Now you are in the MVC world. So now you have something like Angular, which came in, and it is helping us build an architecture end-to-end application using MVC architectural pattern. Why MVC? Why model view controller? Why this is a very famous paradigm, and why did Angular adapt this architecture? We'll speak more about it. But this is how Java has evolved over time, and now it has been evolved into a complete end-to-end architectural pattern. And Angular extensively uses the MVC pattern. So why is that? To just keep it very simple, there is something called a segregation of consoles. So when you build a real-time application, over time it would be a maintenance nightmare if you don't segregate it into different modules. Your application has to be modularized. There is something called as segregation. I'll just say seg of concerns. And there are some principles like solid. If at all you did not read about it, it's fine. We'll explore more about solid. So S is your single responsibility, open and close principle. The D is your dependency injection. which is what is used in Angular extensively. So your dependency injection is again a principle. Your segregation of concerns, that's one of the important things what you need to do when you are working with your project. MVC will help me segregate my concerns. It will help me split the different responsibilities into different buckets so that my application is modular enough. So that is why we have an architectural pattern which is adapted in Angular. Why MVC? How can we use model view controller inside our Angular application? All of that is coming in future sessions when we start discussing deeper in Angular. But just understand this is how JavaScript has evolved into a architectural pattern. So what's in store? We'll speak about what is Angular, and we'll speak about how to work with Angular. What are the things which you need to get installed inside your machine when you want to work with Angular? What are the prerequisites? So you need to get some things done. Like you just look at my environment. You need to have code installed, which is Visual Studio Code, and you need to have Node installed. So if you just say Node-v, that's a Node version which is there on my machine. Why Node? This is your package manager. Everything you pull in inside your environment would be a package, and you would be pulling in something like this: npm install. You would be installing whatever packages you require. Initially you would be going ahead and installing Angular, so your Angular CLI. So you would go ahead and run this command and install the Angular CLI. Once you have the Angular CLI in place, it is just another day for me to create any application. If I just navigate to one of the pages, so inside the demo folder, this is where I want to create my Angular application. How simple is that? I'll just go to that location, ng new. What is my application name? Let me say Angular demo and say enter. Because I have CLI installed globally on my machine, running a and setting up a Angular application is just this command, what you see here. And I have an enterprise level application structure in place for me. So I'll just say what is it is asking me, do you want routing? What is routing? So whenever you go in any application, let's say employee management application, and you navigate, it would be something like host name slash employee. Then you navigate to some employee ID. Your URL would be your host name slash employee slash the ID, whatever ID is of the employee. So your URL changes as and when you navigate to different parts of your website. Your URL keeps on changing. If I just go to Stack Overflow, that's one of your famous websites which you keep visiting as a developer. I keep going to different left nav tools. So you see that my URL is changing. Now it is users. I go to jobs, it's jobs. I go to tags, it is tags. This is what is routing. So I am if this is an Angular application, I would have bound this route to a particular component. So I will bind each route to the component. Why we will bind routes to components? That's the easier way of rendering your components onto the UI. So I would have bound tags component to this route so that this would be rendered onto the UI. So that is what is routing. So we usually see routing when we work with any of the websites out there. So it is just asking me, should I enable Angular routing within this new application which you are planning to create by just giving this simple command? I'll say yes, that's what I want to do. Then it is asking me what is the kind of style sheet which you want to use. CSS is old now. So you have multiple other ways of creating your style sheets. You have SCSS, SAS, less stylus. There are multiple ways you can interact and deal with CSS now. To just keep it simple, I'll just say, yeah, I just want to use the plain old CSS files as my style sheets. I'll just stick to it. So you can navigate through it by your arrow button. So I'm just saying, yeah, CSS is my style sheet pattern. That's about it. And it went ahead and gave me the entire structure. That one command just created all these folders. So you can see end to end is your end to end testing, and you have source folder wherein all your application files are present. Look at how fast it created things for me. Inside the app is where I have my components or my routing module. Your routing module, let me just view it as details, it's more clear there. So your routing module, your component, all of that are created for me in one go, and my root module. So what is root module, what is routing module, what is a component, all of that we'll discuss further. But by just having a simple command typed in my browser saying ng new Angular demo, I have a live application up and running, and I have all these things set up. So it even takes care of different ways in which you actually deal with a real-time application. So in a real-time application, you would be having different environments like a dev environment, staging environment, pre-prod environment, and prod environment. For each environment, I would be having different configuration. So it gave me two configurations: environment.prod.ts and environment.ts. It takes care of all of your real-time necessities into consideration and gives you a proper structure to deal with a Angular application, to deal with any real-time application. That is what is given to me by just having this simple command. So we will have this looked into more when we speak about Angular app. We'll speak about prerequisites, and in prerequisites we'll go ahead and install Node as well as Visual Studio Code, the editor which you just saw. So that is what we'll go ahead and pre-install, and then we can start working with all of the things to do with Angular. Then we'll start to build an application. We'll go with just one draft application like this. We'll build one thing, and then we'll start using the same application, and we'll keep on enhancing it with our multiple examples. We'll learn Angular as well as build very simple pages and components so that you'll understand and digest these topics as and when we go along. So we'll just have one application and we'll start building on top of it. And then we'll have what are the versions of the frameworks which I have in my project, in my environment, just have the same versions. Node V, you can see that this is the latest node which I have in my environment. And when you say Angular, what is the version of Angular which I have in my environment now? So you can see the Angular is the latest version which I have on my system, 7.2.4. Build a Angular project using Angular 6, you would have somewhat different structure than this, and some files would be missing and some files would be included. So that is what we will explore in our initial sessions, wherein we'll go ahead and install the versions of whatever we require and get our environment ready in our initial session. That is what we will discuss in our first session. Then we'll carry on with our practical things. So that would be your introduction. Then we'll create a walking skeleton, or that is what we just created on the fly. So we'll create a walking skeleton of our application. Then we'll move on and learn about how to deploy my application. So just learning about building an application is not sufficient. You have to learn how to deploy your application. We'll speak about it in the deployment module. Then we'll speak about how to build the UI using different components, using directives, using pipes. So all of the different moving parts within Angular. We'll explore all of that using in our UI module. And then we'll also speak about authentication and authorization. Both of these sound similar, authentication and authorization, but they are totally different. We'll speak about this, how to integrate authentication and authorization within our Angular application and move forward with it. Then we'll speak about testing. That is a very important part of your day-to-day activity. You should have your unit test cases in place for any of the application you're working on. Unit test cases are pretty important, and all of the applications which I've worked for since the past 6 years have unit test cases extensively integrated within our environment. We'll speak about what is unit testing, and what is Jasmine, what is Karma, all of that in the unit testing module. So those are the things which we will explore. So what we will speak more on, we'll speak more on creating entities. Some projects call it entities. Some projects call it models. Some projects call it classes. It's all the same. So essentially, you're just terming it differently. You're just doing the same thing again and again. So you just change the terms. We'll speak about what if there is a requirement. How can I change the requirement into code? So whenever there is a requirement, you should look at the nouns. And the nouns are what are the classes. We'll speak about what requirement is. How does a requirement come to be from the client as a requirement document? What is a requirement document? It is just text. It doesn't have any classes or things to be created. I, as a technical person, convert the requirement document into technical document. Once technical document is done, I would have a review of it. Who will review it? My technical lead or my architect. These people will review my technical document. Once the review is done and everyone is fine with the technical doc, then I will start coding for it. Once I'm done coding, then I'll write my unit test cases for what I have just coded, for only the component which I have coded. Once I'm done with coding and unit testing, that's when I'll release it and deploy it. Once it is deployed, your QA comes in and they go ahead and test your application and file bugs. Once you are done with bug fixing and stuff, that's where you will release your project. So essentially, your journey starts with your requirement document and you would go to production. So this is how it would start. We'll understand these stages and how to understand a requirement, how to get classes out of it, out of a requirement. We'll see what a simple requirement looks like and what do we understand by nouns in a requirement. Your nouns are your classes and your verbs are your methods. So it is somewhat English, but that's a better way of understanding requirements and going ahead and writing classes for your requirements. We'll see all of that when we start speaking about requirements and stuff and creating entities. Then we'll speak about how to update data. What are the better ways of updating data inside your Angular application? Updation, essentially, how do you modularize your interaction with your DB? To put it in one way, in just one statement, you would use services. So you would work with services to go ahead and work with updating, deleting, creating, all of that, your CRUD operations to deal with data. We'll speak about that. We'll speak about how can you enable sorting, filtering, caching inside your application. We'll speak about all of this over our Angular journey. So what are the modules which you have in store? So we'll speak about introduction to JavaScript and what is MVC framework and what is Angular and how are all these things correlated to each other in the first module. Then we'll move on and speak about components and document object model interactions in the second module. What is component and what are decorators? Why should I build a component? How can components help me build a modular application? We'll speak about all of that in the second module. Then we'll speak about components and dependency injection. So what's dependency injection? Why is it useful? And how can I leverage dependency injection to loosely couple components in my application? All of that is built in into the Angular project. We will leverage what is built in. That is what we will speak about when we speak about the dependency injection module. Then we'll speak about routes, inbuilt directives which are there, like your ngif and ngfor, and we can also create our custom directives. We'll see how to create that, and we'll speak about pipes. Pipes are the ones which will help you manipulate the data in the UI. What are pipes? How can I work with pipes? Can I create my custom pipes? All of that we'll speak about in this module. Then we'll carry on and speak about what are the third-party libraries which are available, like your Lodash, underscore, RxJS. So you have multiple third-party libraries out there, at least 10,000, I believe, which will help you out with multiple requirements. So you have too many packages which will help you depending upon what your requirement is. So how can we integrate third-party libraries into our application and what are the APIs which are available to integrate that? We'll speak about it in this module. Then we'll finally speak about what is unit testing and Angular CLI. We'll use it right from the beginning. Then we'll close speaking about a real-time project live application end to end and integrate all these parts into one and then just see how the flow looks like, and we'll speak about use cases, how should we understand the requirements and stitch these things together inside our final module. that is how we will proceed further when we speak about different modules which we will work on. So before coming to the next session, install Node. How can I install Node? Just go to Chrome and say install Node. The first link, the nodejs.org. Depending upon what your machine is, go ahead and download that installer. If it is Windows or if it is a Mac, or you just want to download the source code, depending upon what your operating system is, go ahead and download that. If at all it's a Windows operating system, download the 64-bit guy with Windows 10. Go ahead and install this MSI. Once you have Node in place, the next thing which you need to install is Visual Studio Code. Go ahead and install this guy as well. So that's your official page, code.visualstudio.com. Depending upon what your operating system is, download that version, install it, because this is the IDE which we use. What you see here, this is the IDE which we use in our practice. Is this the only IDE I can work with? No. You have WebStorm, you have Visual Studio, you have multiple other IDEs. If you are Atom, or you have Eclipse. Again, I don't know whether Eclipse goes well with Angular or not. So you have multiple IDEs which can work with Angular. If you're comfortable with any other IDE, go ahead and use it. We're not speaking anything specific to IDE. If you're comfortable with any other IDE, go ahead and use it as is. But I would be using Visual Studio Code. So if at all you don't have any IDE handy, then go ahead and install Visual Studio Code. It's free. It's completely free, open source. So have these two things installed. Then we'll speak about what Angular CLI is. We'll create a project. We'll go ahead and get the node packages and the dependencies installed. And we'll see how we can work end to end with an Angular application by learning all of the modules which we have spoken about. So we'll explore all of these modules, and we'll learn about Angular more and more as we move on with our sessions. So that's pretty much what I wanted to introduce and wanted to speak about in our demo. So yeah, so you have it here. So what's Angular? We'll have the environment ready. We'll have the things which needs to be installed ready. Then we'll start speaking about the features of CLI. Generate parts of our application using ng generate commands and building our components. We'll speak about TypeScript. What are the different things which are to do with TypeScript? Why TypeScript is better? What will happen once I build my application in TypeScript? What is transpiling? It is just similar to compiling. TypeScript files are transpiled into JavaScript. We'll speak about TypeScript. Then we'll go ahead and build our Angular application. Once we are good in our TypeScript, the next thing we will speak about is our Angular applications. What are modules in Angular? What is component? How can we create components and stuff? What are ng, if, and for? What is input and output directive and stuff? And we'll speak about routing modules until we deploy it to Git. Those are the things which we will cover. So that's pretty much about what I wanted to present. Hope you got an understanding of what we will discuss. So yeah, bye.